Welcome back, Year 10. So today we are going to be continuing to look at what life is like in the rainforests. And today we are going to be looking at the different adaptations that plants and animals have made so that they can survive here. You will need your booklet for this lesson, so if you don't have the paper copy and you haven't already downloaded it from previous homework, you need to make sure that you've got it. We are going to be using page 27 of the booklet for today's work. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're actually going to do a word fill or a gap fill. So what I need you to do, please, is to, if you are able to type this out, and I would like you to fill in the gaps using the words at the bottom. If you can't type it out, that's absolutely fine. You can just write it out onto paper and do the same. So the words are at the bottom, super easy. You only need to use each word once, and you need to pause the video. This should take you no longer than about 5 minutes. Alright, so answers then. This is what you should have for your answers. So plants, which we know as producers, they make their own energy, pass on their nutrients when they are eaten by animals, which are consumers. The dense vegetation provides lots of food, so animal populations are high. Many plants and species have formed symbiotic relationships. This is where they rely on each other for survival. The agouti, which is a small rodent, looks a little bit like a cross between a kind of chinchilla and a guinea pig. They are the only animals who can crack open the hard seed pod of the Brazil nut to eat the nut insides. Sometimes the agouti bury their nuts, and these can sprout into new seedlings. They don't always remember where they've buried them. And if they're in the rainforest long enough, remember it's hot and it's quite humid, so it's perfect growing conditions, so they quite often sprout into new Brazil nut trees. If the agouti become extinct for maybe hunting, or if they are becoming predated, if they're becoming eaten by a different species, and then the Brazil nuts would decline because they wouldn't be burying the nuts and the nuts wouldn't be able to grow into new seedlings. And so could all of the other animals who live in or feed on the Brazil nut trees. There are some really small types of insects like beetles and certain types of worms and caterpillars who actually rely on living inside the shells of the Brazil nuts once they've been cracked open, and so they would also decline as well. People who sell Brazil nuts may also be affected. So this is just a quick little summary to remind us that every single part, every single component of an ecosystem, the biotic ones, the living ones, and the abiotic ones, they are all really closely linked. And if you change one small aspect of the ecosystem, it can have huge impacts on the rest of the ecosystem. Okay, so the next activity that I would like you to do today, please, is you're going to have a go at a 6-mark question. So we haven't done many exam questions over the last few weeks. We're going to get one in now, and that is to describe and explain the features of the vegetation in this picture. So this is a really typical image of the forest floor or the shrub layer of the rainforest. What you need to do is write 2 paragraphs to explain ideally 2 different types of plant adaptations. So there's lots of different things you could write about from last lesson, including drip tips on the leaves, remember the waxy coating on the leaves, the buttress roots like we can see in this picture here that help the trees, the really tall trees, stabilise themselves and absorb all of the nutrients and the water out of the ground. As well as describing what the adaptation is, you also need to explain how it works, how it helps the plant to survive in the quite difficult conditions of the rainforest. So remember, it's a 6-mark question. It should be 2 fairly chunky paragraphs. It should be almost half a page if you're writing it out. And this should take you no longer than 10 minutes. I would like you to please send this to me at the end of the lesson, either via Show My Homework or by email, so that I can mark it and get it back to you. Okay, now we've talked about plant adaptations, we are going to talk a little bit about animal adaptations. So I'm going to explain to you how 3 particular animals, quite common rainforest animals, have adapted to the conditions here. You're then going to make some notes on this, and eventually you are going to be designing your own rainforest animal and thinking about how you could adapt an existing animal or create a completely new animal that would survive in a particular part of the rainforest. So the first animal I'm going to talk about is the toucan. This is technically called the keel-billed toucan because its bill has a kind of hook on the end of it. And if you don't know much about toucans, they are quite a kind of characteristic rainforest bird. They are really brightly coloured on the whole, and they tend to live in the canopy layer or sometimes the emergent layer. So what toucans do is, first of all, when they create nests, unlike most birds, they don't just build a nest in the branches of a tree. What they do is they find a hole in a tree, or they make a hole in a tree. They've got incredibly strong beaks, and they use these holes to basically hide themselves from any prey animals. So the prey animals that toucans usually need to worry about are larger birds or your big cats and things like that. So they nest in tree holes to keep themselves hidden. When they want to be seen, though, they definitely can be seen because of their large, colourful bill. So it's meant to put off predators. One of the common adaptations of a lot of rainforest animals is that they are brightly coloured, because animals associate brightly coloured animal kind of scales or fur or anything like that with danger. So if you think about the poison dart frog, they are brightly coloured and poisonous. So what animals do is, when they see a brightly coloured animal, they also think that that is poisonous too. So it puts off other predators from attacking them. They have incredibly strong claws, which can grip onto trees and branches to allow them to live in the highest branches without any risk of them falling off. They also have bright colours to attract fellow toucans, attract a mate, because reproduction is very important for rainforest animals and for all animals. And they have an incredibly strong bill or beak to help them crack open seed pods, nut pods, berries, etc., that a lot of other animals wouldn't be able to eat. Remember, in the rainforest, there is so much variety of animals that they have to be able to survive and compete for food, sunlight, space, nests, etc. This animal then is the rather adorable looking, I think, vested anteater. So these are quite strange looking creatures. It's almost like someone's drawn a bear really badly. But the main thing that makes an anteater different to most other animals is the shape of its nose. It's got a really long, almost trunk-like nose, which is really small on the end. And it also has an incredibly long, sticky tongue, like you can see in this picture there. And this tongue is covered in a goo, for want of a better word, that ants and insects will stick to. So basically can force its tongue into a log or something like that, get all of the bugs out, and it gets loads of good food that way that a lot of other animals wouldn't be able to get to. It has a long tail to help it climb trees. It doesn't look like a natural tree climbing animal, but it is actually quite flexible. So they can climb trees. They can also sort of, not really swing, but kind of jump between trees. And this particular animal lives mainly in the canopy, but also on the ground. So it can make the most of both of the kind of really richly diverse parts of the rainforest, where you find lots of bugs and lots of berries and fruits as well. Also has big, terrifying claws. If you've ever seen an anteater's claws, you would not want to get on the wrong side of it, to tear open termite nests, termite mounds, ant nests, and loads of other different places where they're going to get lots of lovely food. Okay, the last animal we're going to look at is my personal favourite then, and this is the three-toed or common sloth, or sloth, however you like to say it. Now, if you don't know much about sloths, they have a reputation for moving extremely slowly. They move this slowly, not just because they're lazy, partly because they're lazy. They tend to sleep for upwards of 22 hours a day. That's the life. But they move extremely slowly so that they don't attract attention to themselves. Predators watch out for things moving or swinging between trees and making lots of noise, and so they move as slowly as possible. And they tend to move at night when they can, so that they don't attract attention from predators, because they're not very good fighters. They don't have much in the way of strength or skill, and sometimes if they fall off the branch that they're hanging from, they can't survive, so they have to use stealth rather than strength. Because sloths move so slowly, they actually grow algae on their fur, because they don't they wash themselves or clean themselves and things like that. And insects and all sorts of other animals tend to basically nest inside their fur, so they grow algae. But this is actually a benefit for the sloth because it helps them to camouflage into the trees and the surroundings, and so therefore hides them a bit better from predators. Also, possibly most importantly, they have incredibly strong legs and really sharp claws so that they can anchor themselves into a tree. They can hang in one tree for several days at a time without really moving, and that's only thanks to their incredibly strong legs and their really sharp claws. Okay, so you have two activities to do at the end of this lesson. The first one is a nice short one, just a note-taking activity where I'd like you to complete question 8 at the bottom of page 27 in the booklet. I've included that little extract here on the left. You need to describe and explain how one plant and one animal has adapted to live in the rainforests. So you can use any of the plant adaptations we talked about last lesson and any of the animal adaptations that we've talked about just now. And you need to not only say what the adaptation is, but also how that adaptation works. How does it help that plant or that animal to survive in that particular part of the rainforest? So that should take you no more than 10 minutes. Okay, your last activity for today then is a bit more of a creative activity. We don't tend to do many creative things at the moment in geography. So what we'd like you to do is actually to design your own rainforest animal. So you need to draw this animal and describe this animal by answering some of the questions around the edge of this sheet. So this sheet is attached to Show My Homework if you want to use the sheet either electronically or print it off if you can. Otherwise, just write the questions out on paper, that's absolutely fine. You can create any animal you like, but it has to survive in the rainforest somewhere. It could be a bird, it could be a combination of lots of different animals that already exist or a completely new one. And there's a list of possible adaptations on the next slide that you might want to pause the video on to help you make some decisions. This shouldn't take you any longer than 20 minutes. And if you are particularly proud of your work, please do send it to your teachers because we are looking for some lovely display work to go up in our classrooms. As always, if you have any questions, please email your teachers. Really look forward to seeing some of your animals and reading your 6-mark questions. And I will see you next time.